The envelope had no return address, but somehow it knew everything about me. I stared at the cream-colored letter in my hands while the late afternoon rain tapped softly against the window of my small apartment in Brooklyn. For a long moment, I simply stood there in silence. My name was written across the front in elegant black ink. Emily Carter. No stamp, no mailing barcode, no indication of where it had come from. Just my name, written in handwriting so precise it looked like it belonged in another century. I had found it slipped beneath my apartment door when I returned from work. At first, I assumed it was some kind of advertisement or invitation to a local event. But the moment I opened it, something felt different. The paper itself was thick and expensive, the kind of paper ordinary people didn't use anymore. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded the letter again and reread the message for what had to be the 10th time. Miss Emily Carter, your presence is requested at Moretti Mansion this Saturday at noon. Transportation will be provided. Further details will be explained upon your arrival. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Nothing. I laughed softly to myself, though the sound felt forced. It had to be some mistake. I was a 27-year-old art teacher who spent most evenings grading assignments and trying to keep my houseplants alive. Nobody requested my presence at mansions, especially not mysterious mansions with names that sounded like they belonged in old movies. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that this letter wasn't meant for anyone else. Somehow, it was meant for me. Outside, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the city. I walked toward the kitchen counter and searched my phone for Moretti Mansion. The results appeared instantly. Photos filled the screen. A sprawling estate hidden beyond acres of private land in upstate New York. Stone walls, iron gates, endless gardens. The mansion itself looked more like a castle than a home. Every article mentioned the same family name. Moretti. Wealth. Influence. Privacy. The kind of people who stayed out of headlines because they never needed attention to prove their power. My stomach tightened. Why would people like that contact someone like me? I scrolled through dozens of articles, hoping to find an answer. Instead, I found something stranger. One photograph showed the front entrance of the mansion. Massive oak doors framed by towering columns. For reasons I couldn't explain, the image made my heart skip. I had never been there. I knew that. Yet the sight of those doors stirred something buried deep inside me. A feeling that vanished before I could understand it. I set the phone down and rubbed my temples. Maybe I was tired. Maybe my imagination was working overtime. But that night, long after the rain stopped, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the letter, about the mansion, about those enormous wooden doors. Around 2 in the morning, I finally drifted off. Then I dreamed of a long hallway illuminated by golden light. I dreamed of footsteps echoing against marble floors. And at the end of the corridor stood the same doors from the photograph. Waiting. Silent. Familiar. When I woke up just before sunrise, my heart was racing. The apartment was empty except for the pale morning light spilling across the floor. For several seconds, I simply sat there staring into space. Then my eyes landed on the letter resting beside my bed. The invitation was still real. The mansion was real. And for the first time, a question surfaced that I couldn't ignore. If I had never been to Moretti Mansion before, why did it feel like it had been waiting for me my entire life? I almost convinced myself not to go. By Friday night, the letter sat folded on my kitchen table beside a stack of unfinished lesson plans, and every rational thought in my head told me to throw it away and move on with my life. But curiosity has a strange way of growing in the dark. The more I tried to ignore the invitation, the more impossible it became to think about anything else. Saturday arrived cold and gray. At exactly 11 o'clock, a black luxury sedan pulled up outside my apartment building. The driver stepped out wearing a dark suit and politely opened the rear door without saying more than my name. Somehow, that made everything feel even stranger. The drive north took nearly 2 hours. Manhattan disappeared behind us. Then the suburbs. Then small towns and winding roads lined with towering trees whose branches stretched across the sky like silent guardians. I watched the scenery pass through the tinted window while a knot tightened steadily in my stomach. Every mile seemed to carry me farther away from the life I understood. Eventually the car turned onto a private road. Tall iron gates appeared ahead. They opened automatically before we even slowed down. Beyond them stretched acres of perfectly maintained grounds. Fountains, gardens, stone pathways, and finally, the mansion itself. It was even larger than the photographs online. Massive, elegant, timeless. The kind of place built to outlive generations. The moment I stepped out of the car, a strange feeling washed over me. Not fear. Not exactly. Something deeper. Like standing in a place I had forgotten rather than somewhere I had never been. The front doors opened before I reached them. An older woman greeted me with a warm but measured smile. "Welcome, Miss Carter. We have been expecting you." The word sent a chill through me. We. Not I. We. She led me through a grand entrance hall filled with marble floors and sunlight streaming through enormous windows. Every detail seemed impossibly expensive. Yet what unsettled me most was the feeling that people were watching. Not openly. Not rudely. Just quietly observing my arrival. As if they already knew something about me that I did not. We moved through a series of hallways before stopping outside a pair of dark wooden doors. The woman turned toward me. "Mr. Moretti will see you now." Before I could ask a single question, she opened the doors and stepped aside. The room beyond was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls. A fire crackled softly despite the mild weather. Behind a large desk stood a man looking out toward the distant hills beyond the windows. He was tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. The kind of man who carried authority without needing to announce it. Slowly, he turned around. Our eyes met. Everything inside me seemed to stop at once. His expression changed for only a fraction of a second. So quickly that I almost missed it. Recognition. Not surprise. Not curiosity. Recognition. As though he had already seen me 100 times before this moment. Then his features settled into calm control. "Emily Carter," he said quietly. His voice was low and steady. "Welcome home." My breath caught. Home. I had never met Damian Moretti in my life. Yet standing there beneath his unwavering gaze, I suddenly felt certain of one thing. He already knew exactly who I was. I stood frozen for several seconds, certain I had misheard him. Home. The word lingered in the air long after Damian Moretti spoke it. He seemed completely unaffected by the reaction it triggered inside me. Calm. Composed. Watching me with those sharp gray eyes that somehow felt familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. I cleared my throat. "I think there has been some mistake." My voice sounded smaller than I intended. "I have never been here before." A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth, though it never fully reached his eyes. Perhaps. The answer only deepened my confusion. He gestured toward a chair across from his desk. I sat carefully, trying to ignore the strange tension gathering in my chest. The office felt less like a room and more like a museum. Ancient books, oil paintings, family photographs arranged with deliberate precision. Every object seemed connected to a story that I was not allowed to hear. Damian remained standing beside the window. "Thank you for accepting the invitation. You still have not explained why I am here." For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not discomfort, caution, as though he was choosing every word carefully. "Some answers require patience, Emily." I almost laughed. Patience was difficult when a powerful stranger invited you to a mansion and greeted you like a long-lost relative. Before I could press him further, a knock interrupted us. An older housekeeper entered carrying a silver tray with tea and pastries. Damian thanked her quietly before turning back toward me. "You have had a long journey. There will be time for questions." I hated that part of me wanted to stay and demand the truth. But another part of me was becoming increasingly curious. After a brief conversation filled with vague answers and careful silences, Damian offered to have someone show me the estate. Since I clearly was not getting answers today, I reluctantly agreed. The woman guiding me introduced herself as Margaret. She had worked at the mansion for more than 30 years. As we walked through endless hallways, she shared small details about the property, the gardens, the library, the art collection. Yet every time I mentioned Damian or asked why I had been invited, her smile tightened slightly, and she redirected the conversation. It was impossible not to notice. Certain subjects were off-limits. The mansion seemed beautiful at first glance, but beneath the elegance existed something hidden. Something everyone knew about except me. Nearly an hour later, Margaret led me down a quieter corridor on the eastern side of the mansion. Unlike the other areas, this hallway felt strangely untouched. The air was cooler, the lighting softer. Portraits lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow us as we passed. Then I saw it. A pair of dark wooden doors standing at the very end of the corridor. larger than any others in the house. Unlike the rest of the mansion, these doors showed no signs of decoration. No nameplate, no artwork, just polished wood and a heavy brass lock. My footsteps slowed automatically. Something about them pulled at me. The same feeling I had experienced when looking at the photograph online. Familiarity without memory. I took a step closer. Margaret immediately stopped walking. That area is private. Her voice remained polite, but the warmth had disappeared. I looked back at her. What is behind those doors? For the first time all day, genuine concern crossed her face. Some questions are better left unanswered. Then she gently guided me away from the corridor. But as we turned the corner, I glanced back one final time, and I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of a piano note echo from somewhere beyond the locked doors. I did not sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the locked doors at the end of the corridor. I heard that single piano note echoing through the silence. By morning, I had almost convinced myself that I imagined it. Almost. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the guest suite as I stood staring at the grounds below. The estate stretched for what looked like miles. Perfect gardens, stone pathways, a small lake reflecting the pale sky. Everything appeared peaceful. Yet beneath that beauty, something felt unfinished, like a sentence waiting for its final word. After breakfast, I decided to explore on my own. No guides, no careful redirections. If everyone in this mansion was determined to avoid my questions, I would find answers myself. The hallways seemed quieter during the day. Most of the staff moved with practiced efficiency, always polite, always smiling, yet somehow always watching. As I wandered through the western wing, I discovered a series of rooms filled with artwork collected over generations. Landscapes, family portraits, sculptures. The collection could have belonged in a museum. I moved slowly from one room to another until a particular painting caught my attention. It hung alone on a far wall beneath a skylight. A portrait of a young woman painted in remarkable detail. She could not have been older than 25. Her light brown hair rested across her shoulders. Her eyes were bright and thoughtful. She wore a simple blue dress and a silver necklace. For a moment, I simply stared. My heartbeat quickened. There was something familiar about her face. Not identical, not exactly, but close enough to make me uncomfortable. I stepped closer. The resemblance became impossible to ignore. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, even the small dimple in her left cheek. She looked like she could have been a relative I never knew existed. A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. Her name was Isabella. I turned sharply. Damien stood several feet behind me. I had not heard him enter. He was dressed more casually today, though the quiet authority surrounding him remained unchanged. His gaze remained fixed on the portrait. For the first time since meeting him, he seemed distracted. Vulnerable, even. Who was she? I asked quietly. Silence stretched between us. Damien approached the painting. His expression softened in a way I had not seen before. Someone important. The answer felt painfully incomplete. I looked back toward the portrait. She looks familiar. The moment the words left my mouth, something changed. Damien's entire body went still. The air itself seemed to tighten. His eyes shifted from the painting to me. Not with surprise. With concern. Genuine concern. As though I had unknowingly stepped onto dangerous ground. Several long seconds passed before he spoke again. What exactly feels familiar? I opened my mouth, then hesitated. How could I explain a feeling that made no sense? I do not know. It is just a feeling. His jaw tightened slightly. Then, just as quickly, the expression vanished behind the controlled mask he usually wore. Feelings can be deceptive, yet his voice carried none of its usual certainty. We stood there in silence, staring at the portrait. Then my eyes drifted toward the small brass plaque mounted beneath the frame. Isabella Moretti, 1998. My breath caught. 29 years ago, long before I was born. Yet somehow, standing before her portrait, I felt an impossible certainty settling deep inside my chest. I had seen her face before. I just could not remember where. I could not stop thinking about Isabella Moretti. The portrait followed me long after I left the gallery. Her eyes lingered in my memory while I wandered through the mansion for the rest of the afternoon. Everywhere I went, I found myself searching for pieces of her. A photograph on a bookshelf. A name hidden inside an old book. A clue that might explain why her face felt so familiar. Yet every answer seemed to move farther away the closer I got. By evening, clouds gathered over the estate. Rain tapped softly against the windows as I sat alone in the guest suite. I tried reading. I tried watching television. Nothing worked. My attention kept drifting back to the questions no one wanted to answer. A quiet knock came at the door shortly after 7. One of the staff members entered carrying a tray with dinner. Before leaving, she hesitated. "Mr. Moretti asked me to make sure you had everything you needed." I looked up. Does he always keep such a close eye on his guests? The woman offered a polite smile. "Not usually." Then she left. The answer unsettled me more than it should have. Not usually. Throughout the day, I had noticed small things. Someone always seemed to know where I was. If I paused to admire a painting, a staff member appeared nearby. If I stepped outside, someone quietly opened doors before I reached them. None of it felt threatening. If anything, it felt protective. Yet I could not understand why. I was not important. I was an art teacher from Brooklyn. Why would a man like Damien Moretti devote so much attention to me? Later that evening, unable to ignore my curiosity, I left my room and wandered the halls again. The mansion had a different personality at night. Shadows stretched across the floors. Lamps cast warm pools of golden light along the walls. Everything felt quieter, older, almost alive. I found myself drifting toward the eastern wing without consciously deciding to go there. Toward the corridor with the locked doors. The hallway stood empty when I arrived. Silence surrounded me. No staff, no footsteps, no voices, just the soft ticking of a distant clock. I approached slowly. The brass lock reflected the dim light. Standing there, I experienced the same strange sensation as before. Familiarity, recognition, a memory trap just beyond reach. Then I noticed something new. A small table stood against the wall beside the doors. I was certain it had not been there yesterday. Resting on top was a silver picture frame. My pulse quickened. Inside the frame was an old photograph. A woman stood smiling beside a lake. The image was faded with age, but there was no mistaking who it was. Isabella. I picked up the frame carefully. My breath caught. Beside her stood a young boy of about 10 years old. Damien. Even as a child, his eyes were unmistakable. But that was not what shocked me. At the bottom corner of the photograph, barely visible beneath years of wear, stood a little girl. Most of her face was hidden behind Isabella's shoulder. Yet I could still see enough to freeze in place. Light brown hair. A familiar smile. A small dimple in her left cheek. She looked exactly like me. I stared at the photograph so long that my hands began to tremble. It was impossible. The picture had to be at least 20 years old. Maybe older. Yet the little girl standing beside Isabella looked so much like me that it felt as though I were looking into a distorted mirror. My first instinct was to search for another explanation. A cousin. A coincidence. Someone who simply shared similar features. But deep down, I already knew why my heart was racing. Because I did not believe in coincidences anymore. Not after the letter. Not after the portrait. Not after every strange feeling that had followed me since arriving at this estate. I carefully turned the frame over. Nothing. No date. No note. No explanation. Just smooth wood worn by time. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around. Damien stood at the far end of the corridor. His expression changed the moment he saw the photograph in my hands. For the briefest second, genuine alarm crossed his face. Then it vanished beneath his usual composure. He approached slowly. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavier than any conversation. Finally, I held up the frame. "Who is she?" My voice barely sounded like my own. Damien's eyes moved to the photograph. "You should not have found that." The answer only intensified my frustration. "Stop doing that." The words escaped before I could stop them. "Stop answering questions with more questions." He remained quiet. "Everywhere I go in this house, people act like they know something about me. You look at me like you have known me for years. Then I find this photograph." I pointed toward the little girl. "And now I find someone who looks exactly like me standing beside your family." Damien looked away toward the locked doors. The movement alone told me everything. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. "Tell me the truth." His jaw tightened. For several long seconds, the only sound came from the rain tapping against distant windows. "The truth is complicated." I laughed bitterly. "That is not an answer." His gaze returned to mine. For the first time since arriving, I saw exhaustion behind his eyes. Not physical exhaustion. The kind carried by someone who had spent years protecting a secret. "I have been searching for answers myself for a very long time, Emily." The The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. He was not lying. At least not about that. Before I could respond, another voice interrupted us. "Miss Carter." Margaret stood at the entrance of the hallway. She looked relieved to see us both. Then her eyes landed on the photograph. The color drained from her face. She hurried forward. "Where did you find that?" "It was sitting right here." Margaret exchanged a quick glance with Damien. Something passed silently between them. Concern, confusion, perhaps even fear. Then she whispered something that made my stomach drop. "That photograph was locked away years ago." The corridor suddenly felt colder. I looked back at the frame in my hands. If the photograph had been locked away, then someone had placed it here. Recently. Deliberately. Almost as if they wanted me to find it. And for the first time since arriving at the mansion, I realized there might be someone else hiding secrets inside these walls besides Damien Moretti. The storm arrived shortly after midnight. Wind rattled the tall windows of the mansion, while rain swept across the grounds in silver sheets. I sat awake in the guest suite, staring at the photograph resting on the table beside me. No matter how many times I looked at it, the result was always the same. The little girl looked like me. Not similar. Not close. Like me. My thoughts chased each other in endless circles. Someone had placed the photograph outside the locked corridor. Someone wanted me to see it. But why now? And why me? A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the room. For a brief second, everything turned white. Then darkness returned. That was when I heard it. A piano. Soft. Distant. Just a few notes drifting through the silence. I sat upright immediately. The melody lasted only seconds before stopping. My heart began to race. I had heard the same sound before near the locked doors. This time I knew I was not imagining it. I slipped on my shoes and stepped into the hallway. The mansion seemed asleep. The only light came from antique wall lamps casting long golden shadows across the floor. The piano notes sounded again. Faint but unmistakable. I followed them. One hallway. Then another. The melody seemed to pull me forward like a thread. Eventually, I reached the eastern wing. The same corridor. The same locked doors waiting at the far end. The music stopped the moment I arrived. Silence settled over everything. I moved closer. The brass lock reflected the dim light. Then I noticed something unusual. The doors were not fully closed. Only by an inch. Barely enough to notice. My pulse quickened. Yesterday they had been locked. Tonight they stood slightly open. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to leave. Yet curiosity had carried me too far to turn back now. Slowly, I reached for the handle. Before my fingers touched the metal, a voice echoed behind me. "Emily." I spun around. Damien stood several feet away. He looked different tonight. Not angry. Not surprised. Tired. As though he had expected this moment for a long time. My hand dropped immediately from the door. I heard music. He glanced toward the doors. Something unreadable passed through his expression. "You should not be here." The answer irritated me more than it should have. Everyone keeps saying that. My voice echoed softly through the corridor. I should not see the photograph. I should not ask questions. I should not come here. Yet nobody will tell me why. Damien walked closer. The storm outside growled in the distance. Because some answers change everything. Maybe I deserve those answers. For several seconds he said nothing. His eyes studied my face carefully. Then his gaze shifted toward the slightly open doors. For the first time, genuine concern appeared. Not for himself. For me. "Emily," he said quietly. "There are people who spent years making sure certain secrets remained hidden." My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Another flash of lightning illuminated the corridor. Damien looked toward the darkness beyond the doors. Then back at me. "It means whoever left that photograph wants you to discover something before I am ready to tell you." The words settled heavily between us. Before I could ask another question, a sudden sound echoed from somewhere deep inside the hidden wing. Not music this time. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and impossible to explain because according to everyone in this mansion, nobody was supposed to be behind those doors. For several seconds, neither of us moved. The sound came again. A single footstep somewhere beyond the partially opened doors. Then another. Slow, careful, deliberate. Every instinct told me someone was inside the hidden wing. I looked at Damien. Whatever calm he usually carried had vanished. His attention remained fixed on the darkness beyond the doorway. "Stay here," he said quietly. "Absolutely not." The answer escaped before I could think twice. If there truly was someone inside, Then they might finally have the answers I had been chasing since arriving at the mansion. Damien seemed ready to argue, but another sound interrupted him. A door closing somewhere deeper inside the wing. Not loud, just enough to confirm that we had both heard it. Without another word, Damien pushed the doors open fully. The hinges moved almost silently. A cool draft drifted out to meet us. I expected another hallway. Instead, an entire section of the mansion revealed itself beyond the entrance. The hidden wing looked untouched by time. Dust floated through the air. Covered furniture lined the walls. Tall windows overlooked the storm outside. It felt less like part of a home and more like a memory preserved behind glass. We moved carefully through the corridor. Every sound seemed amplified. The ticking of an old clock. The rain striking distant windows. The creak of wooden floors beneath our feet. Yet whoever had been there moments earlier was gone. Or hidden. At the end of the hall stood a single room with its doors slightly open. Damien stopped when he saw it. His expression hardened. That room should be locked. My pulse quickened. Together we approached. The door opened inward with the slightest push. Then everything inside stole the air from my lungs. Photographs. Hundreds of them. Covering every wall. Covering shelves. Covering tables. Some framed. Some loose. Some carefully arranged in albums. For a moment, my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. Then I stepped closer. Every photograph showed the same child. A little girl. Different ages. Different places. Different years. Yet always the same face. My face. I felt the room tilt slightly around me. One picture showed a little girl playing beside a lake. Another showed her holding a stuffed rabbit. Another captured her laughing on a playground. There were birthday photographs. School photographs. Holiday photographs. Years and years of memories carefully preserved. My hands began to shake. This is impossible. Damien remained silent. I turned toward him. Who is she? Even as I asked the question, I already knew the answer. The resemblance was undeniable. Not similar. Not close. Exact. My eyes drifted toward a photograph near the center of the room. The date written beneath it stopped my heart. 20 years ago. I would have been 7 years old. 7. Yet I had no memory of this place. No memory of these photographs. No memory of any connection to the Moretti family. Then I noticed something resting on a small wooden desk near the window. A worn leather journal. Unlike everything else, it sat open, waiting, as though someone had left it there intentionally. Slowly, I approached. The first page contained only 6 handwritten words. Welcome back, Emily. It is finally time. My eyes remained fixed on the journal while the storm rattled the windows behind me. For a long moment, I could not breathe. Welcome back, Emily. It is finally time. The handwriting was elegant and deliberate, the same style used on the letter that had arrived at my apartment. Someone had planned this. Every step, every discovery, every question. I slowly turned the page. The paper crackled beneath my fingers. The first entry was dated 20 years earlier. My pulse quickened. Most of the journal consisted of observations rather than memories. Descriptions, locations, notes, as though someone had been documenting a child's life from a distance. The child was me. My stomach tightened as I read line after line describing birthdays, schools, favorite books, even the stray cat I used to feed outside my elementary school. Details so specific that no stranger should have known them. I looked up at Damien. Who wrote this? His silence lasted too long. Damien. My voice shook. Who wrote it? He stared at the journal with an expression I had never seen before. Regret. My mother started it. The answer hit me like a gust of cold air. I looked around the room again. The photographs. The journal. The portrait. Isabella. Suddenly, everything seemed connected by invisible threads. Why would your mother keep records about me? Another silence. Then Damien walked toward the window and looked out into the darkness. Because she believed one day you would come back. The room felt impossibly still. Come back from where? He closed his eyes briefly before answering. That is the part one have been trying to understand for years. Frustration surged through me. Every answer led to another mystery. Every truth seemed wrapped inside 3 more secrets. I turned another page. This entry was different. Instead of observations, it contained a personal note written by Isabella herself. Emily laughed today. She spent an hour chasing butterflies near the lake. She still does not realize how much light she brings into this house. If anything ever happens, I hope she remembers she was loved here. My vision blurred. I read the sentence again and again. Loved here. Not visited here. Not seen here. Here. Inside this mansion. My hands trembled so badly that I nearly dropped the journal. I do not remember any of this. Damien nodded slowly. I know. Something in his voice made me look up. He seemed exhausted, like a man carrying a burden too heavy to hold any longer. Before I could ask another question, a sharp knock echoed through the room. Both of us looked toward the doorway. Margaret stood there, visibly distressed. Damien. Her voice was unusually tense. You need to see this. He immediately understood something was wrong. What happened? Margaret hesitated before answering. Someone entered the security office tonight. A chill ran through me. Damien stepped forward. Was anything taken? Margaret swallowed hard. No. The answer should have been reassuring. Instead, her expression grew even more troubled. Nothing was taken, but someone left a message. The room seemed to tighten around us. What message? Margaret looked directly at me. Her face had gone pale. Then she quietly spoke the words that made my heart stop. It said she remembers more than you think. The words followed me long after Margaret spoke them. She remembers more than you think. I repeated the sentence silently while Damien and Margaret left to investigate the security office. Somehow, it felt less like a threat and more like a warning, as though someone was trying to wake a memory buried deep inside my mind. I remained alone in the hidden room surrounded by photographs that should not have existed. Every image challenged everything I believed about my own life. I sat at the small desk and continued reading Isabella's journal. The entries became increasingly personal as the years passed. She wrote about my favorite colors, my habit of collecting smooth stones during walks, the way I always asked too many questions. Reading her words felt strangely intimate. Not because she described me accurately, because she described me with affection, the kind of affection that could not be faked. Several pages later, a folded piece of paper slipped from between the journal pages and landed softly on the floor. I bent down and picked it up. It was a drawing, crayon on construction paper, childlike and imperfect. A house beside a lake. A woman smiling beneath a bright yellow sun. In one corner, written in uneven handwriting, were 3 simple words. For Miss Bella. My breath caught. I knew that handwriting. It was mine. Not because I remembered writing it, because I recognized the way I still formed certain letters even now. The room seemed to tilt. My fingers tightened around the paper. A sudden image flashed through my mind. So quickly I almost missed it. Sunlight reflecting off water. Laughter. The scent of flowers. Then it vanished. I closed my eyes. Another fragment surfaced. A woman kneeling beside me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. Her voice saying something I could not quite hear. Then darkness. When I opened my eyes, my heart was racing. The memories were incomplete, broken pieces floating beneath the surface. But they were real. For the first time, I understood what the message meant. Someone believed I could remember. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Damien entered the room alone. He looked exhausted. More than exhausted. Defeated. His eyes immediately found the drawing in my hands. Where did you get that? He asked quietly. I held it up. Inside the journal. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. You have seen it before. The statement was not a question. Damien nodded slowly. Many times. I stared at him. Then stopped protecting me from the truth. Silence filled the room. The storm outside had begun to fade. Rain still tapped against the windows, but the thunder was gone. Damien approached the desk and looked down at the drawing. I never wanted you to learn about this like this. Then how? His gaze remained fixed on the paper. When you were ready. Frustration surged through me. Ready for what? For the first time since arriving at the mansion, Damien met my eyes without looking away. Ready to learn that the life you remember is only part of the story. The words settled heavily between us. Before I could respond, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. The color immediately drained from his face. My stomach tightened. What is it? Damien looked toward the doorway. Then back at me. Someone just accessed records that have been sealed for 20 years. A chill crawled through me. Records about who? His answer came barely above a whisper. About you. The room suddenly felt smaller. Records about me. 20 years old. Sealed. Hidden. The words echoed inside my head while Damien stared at the phone in his hand. Whatever he was reading seemed to confirm fears he had been carrying long before I arrived at the mansion. Who accessed them? I asked. Damien locked the screen and slipped the phone into his pocket. I do not know yet. It was not the answer I wanted. It was probably not the complete truth either. I was beginning to recognize the difference. Every secret in this house seemed protected by layers of half-answers and careful omissions. Yet for the first time, I sensed those walls beginning to crack. We left the hidden room together. The mansion felt different now. Not mysterious. Alert. Staff members moved quietly through the halls. Conversations stopped when we approached. The atmosphere reminded me of a thunderstorm that had not fully passed. The rain outside had ended, but everyone was still waiting for another strike of lightning. By morning, the clouds had cleared completely. Sunlight poured across the estate, making everything appear normal again. Beautiful gardens, calm water, birds drifting above the lake. Yet I could not shake the feeling that something important was moving beneath the surface. After breakfast, I wandered outside alone. I needed air, space, distance from the endless questions. The lake sat nearly half a mile from the mansion. As I followed the stone path toward the water, fragments of memory continued flashing through my mind. Nothing complete, just moments. A yellow ribbon, a woman's laughter, the scent of lavender. Every image disappeared before I could fully grasp it. The lake shimmered beneath the morning sun. I stood at the shoreline watching gentle ripples spread across the surface. Then I noticed something unusual. A wooden bench hidden beneath a large oak tree. It looked old, weathered, forgotten. Drawn by curiosity, I walked closer. My pulse quickened the moment I saw the small brass plaque attached to the backrest. For Emily. Always remember the lake. I froze. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My fingers traced the engraved letters. Someone had placed this here years ago. For me. Not a girl who looked like me. Not a child with a similar name. Me. A sudden memory surfaced stronger than the others. I was sitting on this very bench. My feet were too short to reach the ground. Someone sat beside me. A woman. Warm hands. Gentle voice. I still could not see her face clearly, but I knew she mattered. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. You found it. Damien's voice came from behind me. I turned. He stood a few yards away, hands in his pockets, watching me carefully. How long have you known about this? I asked. He looked toward the lake. Since I was 14. And you never told me? The question escaped before I could stop it. The moment the words left my mouth, both of us went silent. Because hidden inside that question was a deeper one. Why should he have told me anything at all? Unless he had been connected to my story far longer than I realized. Damien looked at me with an expression filled with something I could not name. Then he quietly said the words that changed everything. Emily, I have been looking for you for almost 20 years. For several seconds, I could not speak. The lake shimmered behind Damien, while his words echoed through my mind. I have been looking for you for almost 20 years. Everything inside me seemed to freeze. The breeze moving across the water. The distant birds overhead. Even time itself felt suspended. Why? The question came out barely above a whisper. Damien looked away toward the shoreline before answering. Because someone asked me to. My pulse quickened. Who? The answer arrived immediately. My mother. Isabella. The name settled heavily between us. Suddenly, every photograph, every journal entry, every strange feeling since arriving at the mansion seemed connected by a single thread. Isabella Moretti. The woman whose portrait watched over the mansion. The woman who had written about me with such warmth. The woman who somehow knew I would return one day. Damien gestured toward the bench. Sit. Normally I would have refused. Demanded answers immediately. But exhaustion had begun replacing my frustration. I sat. Damien remained standing for a moment before taking the place beside me. Neither of us spoke. The lake stretched before us, calm and endless. Finally, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a folded envelope. My heart skipped. The paper looked old. Very old. What is that? Something my mother left behind. Carefully, he handed it to me. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. The same elegant script from the journal. If you are reading this, Emily has returned. I stared at the words while my chest tightened. The letter continued. There are truths she deserves to know. Not because of who she was, but because of who she has become. Please tell her what happened by the lake. Tell her why we had to let her go. The sentence struck me like lightning. Let her go. My hands began to shake. I looked up at Damien. What does that mean? His expression softened. For the first time since I had met him, there was no hesitation. No careful avoidance. Only sadness. It means you lived here. My breath caught. No. The denial escaped automatically. I would remember. Damien nodded slowly. You should. He looked toward the water. When you were 7 years old, your mother brought you here. The world narrowed around his voice. Every word seemed to arrive from very far away. She worked closely with my family. She and Isabella became close friends. Eventually, this place became a second home for you. A memory surfaced unexpectedly, running through gardens. Laughter, sunshine reflecting off the lake. Then it disappeared again. My hands tightened around the letter. Why do I not remember any of it? Damien exhaled slowly. Because after your mother died, everything changed. Silence crashed over us. My stomach dropped. My mother died when I was 7. The fact had always been simple, tragic, final. Yet now even that certainty felt unstable. Damien looked directly at me. That is what you were told. The lake seemed to vanish. The bench beneath me disappeared. Every sound faded into silence. Only those 6 words remained. That is what you were told. And for the first time in my life, I realized the story of my childhood might not belong to me at all. The words shattered something inside me. That is what you were told. I sat motionless beside the lake while the afternoon sunlight danced across the water. My entire life had been built upon a story I had never questioned. My mother died. I was taken in by distant relatives. I grew up. I moved forward. Simple, painful, finished. Yet now every piece felt uncertain. Damien remained silent, allowing the truth to settle between us. Finally, I looked down at Isabella's letter once more. The paper trembled in my hands. If my mother did not die, I whispered, then where is she? Damien lowered his eyes. That is the question we spent 20 years trying to answer. A memory surfaced without warning, stronger than all the others. A woman kneeling before me near the lake, tears shining in her eyes, a silver key hanging from a chain around her neck. Her voice trembling as she said, remember who you are. The memory struck so suddenly that I gasped. My hand flew instinctively to my chest. Damien immediately noticed. What happened? I looked at him, barely able to breathe. The key. His expression changed. For the first time, genuine shock appeared. You remember the key? I nodded slowly. Another image followed. The same silver key resting inside a small wooden box. Isabella standing nearby. My mother smiling. Then darkness swallowed everything again. Damien stood abruptly. Without a word, he extended his hand toward me. Come with me. Minutes later we were back inside the mansion. We walked through the hidden wing and entered the room filled with photographs. Sunlight streamed through the windows now, illuminating every memory preserved inside those walls. Damien crossed the room and stopped before an antique cabinet hidden behind a curtain. He unlocked it using a small brass key. Inside rested a wooden box. My heart began pounding. The moment I saw it, I recognized it. Not from photographs, not from stories, from memory, real memory. My hands trembled as Damien carefully lifted the box and placed it before me. Slowly, I opened the lid. Inside lay a silver key attached to a faded blue ribbon. Tears filled my eyes instantly. The memory returned completely. My mother placing the ribbon around my neck. Isabella smiling beside her. The lake, the gardens, the laughter, the love. I had lived here. I had belonged here. Then I noticed something else inside the box. A folded document, older than everything around it. Damien carefully unfolded the paper and handed it to me. My eyes moved across the page. Then I stopped breathing. The document named a legal trust established decades earlier. A trust created jointly by Isabella Moretti and my mother. And written beside the beneficiary's name were 2 words that changed everything. Emily Carter. Beneath it, a final handwritten note from Isabella waited. The mansion was never meant to protect our secrets. It was meant to protect you. Tears blurred my vision. I looked around the room one final time. The photographs, the journal, the memories, the years of unanswered questions. Then I looked at Damien. For 20 years, he had carried a promise that was never truly his to carry. A promise to find a little girl who had forgotten her way home. He reached into the wooden box and gently placed the silver key into my hand. His voice was quiet, but steady. My mother believed one day you would return for it. I closed my fingers around the key as sunlight filled the room. And in that moment, I finally understood something that had been waiting behind every mystery. Sometimes the greatest secret is not what was hidden from you. It is discovering who never stopped waiting for you to come back.